Oh boy, I really wish I wasn't making this video. The Matrix is one of my favorite films of all time. It is a masterclass in fight choreography and camera work, which is enhanced by some truly revolutionary effects. All of this is further enhanced by a brilliant script with wonderful characters and a highly engaging mythology. While I thought the sequels were pretty bad to say the least, I was still intrigued to see what Lana Wachowski was going to do with The Matrix Resurrections, and the fantastic trailers only got me more excited to see this film. I was so ready to rave about how amazing the new Matrix movie was and how it felt like a return to form for the series, and took the series in a new and interesting direction. But that's not what happened. To put it short, I really disliked this movie. Is it god-awful? No, obviously I've seen far worse, but it is definitely one of the most colossally disappointing theatre experiences I've had in a fairly long time. I can definitely see a lot of people enjoying this movie, and honestly, great. I'm happy for you. Unfortunately, I was not one of those peeps. So today, I'm basically going to take the time to explain why I don't think this movie works. For me, the fundamental reason that this movie fails is simply because it doesn't really know what it wants to be. At first, the film tries to be a meta-critique of Hollywood's current fascination and perhaps obsession with reboots, remakes, and sequels. Nostalgia naysayers have often viewed remakes, reboots, and sequels as obvious cash grabs that draw on the audiences sometimes over decades spanning nostalgia for a particular property in order to garner success, both critically and financially. The idea of Neo being a video game developer who created the first three films as video games being forced to make a fourth video game is an intriguing idea and a good way of setting up its meta-commentary. However, it conveys this in possibly the most forced and obnoxious ways possible, such as having Warner Bros. Tell Neo that they're going to make The Matrix 4 with or without him, and a montage showing Neo being forced to adhere to focus group tests, and then being forced to listen to a creative team slowly turning his ideas into something they were not, even going as far as to suggest they just do what they did in the first game. This sounds really interesting, but in its execution, the film's attempt at this meta-commentary feels like the movie pretentiously holding up a sign saying, "Look at me, I'm cool and different." However, I was not expecting that one line about just doing what they did in the first one again to be the line that basically sums up almost the entire movie. If nostalgia naysayers need proof to back up their arguments, this is it. As soon as the new Morpheus and Bugs start trying to break Neo out of the Matrix and bring him back to his old self, the movie second guesses itself and becomes the very thing it was trying to criticize in the beginning, as the plot becomes lost in a series of scenes that are designed to metaphorically call back to the first movie to appease longtime fans, which also includes flashbacks to the other movies. You want to see a fight between Morpheus and Neo in a dojo? You got it. You want to see Neo fight a newly revived Agent Smith with shots that are identical to ones from their first fight? You got it. You want to see Neo wake up in the real world to find it under the control of the machines? You got it. You want to see Neo and Trinity again? You got it. Missed the first three? Don't worry, the movie shows you everything you need to know through flashbacks. Constantly. The movie is trying to reutilize all these elements from the other movies, but it lacks the substance of the original film, so these callbacks feel meaningless, and by contradicting the film's meta-criticism of nostalgic Hollywood, they feel aimless outside of trying to appease fans. Ironic, considering this is exactly what the movie was trying to criticize in the first place. The movie's lack of substance destroyed any investment I had in the story and characters. Every scene feels like an exposition dump that is meant to propel the story forward at a breakneck pace with very little character development, making the progression of the film feel rushed. The characters are all so one-dimensional and hollow, and none of them are developed enough for me to care. And because I didn't really care about any of the characters, I didn't really care about what was even going on, so I just got bored. The only character in this movie who feels like they have an arc is Neo, but that doesn't really mean it works. As the trailer suggested, Neo is suffering from blue pill-induced amnesia due to the influence of a character called the Analyst, played by Neil Patrick Harris, having forgotten the existence of the Matrix, the war between mankind and the machines, and pretty much everything that happened to him before Resurrections. An interesting idea that sadly becomes a bad case of lazy writing, as Neo's amnesia basically becomes an excuse for the movie to run through Neo's arc from the first film once again. Everything you see Neo do in the first film, such as being contacted by Morpheus, being forced to choose between the red and the blue pill, learning how to fight and use his powers, and even disobeying orders to save someone he cares about happens in this movie. It's almost beat for beat identical. It never feels like Neo expands as a character or is further developed, so his story doesn't really go anywhere, which actually makes him less interesting as a lead. Which begs the question, what was even the point of bringing him back if you weren't even going to do anything new or interesting with him? And because his story is the main focus of the movie doesn't go anywhere. The Matrix Resurrections is far more concerned with soullessly recreating and referencing the original film, and it therefore loses the point of what it was even trying to say, thus failing to justify its own existence. I like seeing Neo and Trinity back, and Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss still have amazing chemistry, but while Trinity is certainly talked about a lot throughout the movie, she's weirdly barely in it. She appears from time to time to talk about her husband Chad and their kids, but then leaves the movie for long stretches of time before reappearing again. At one point, she disappears for so long that I actually forgot she was even in the movie. Her lack of screen time is detrimental, making her underdeveloped as a character because we don't learn anything about what her life has been like since the end of Revolutions, aside from her new husband and their children, which are never explored, and that she likes motorcycles. Oh yeah, and Trinity suddenly has the same powers as Neo, which is never explained, so it just doesn't make any sense. The directing isn't nearly as good as the original, and it really shows in the action sequences. Part of what made the original film so awesome was the fight choreography and the camera work. The camera lingered on the movements of the characters just long enough for you to get an idea of what was going on, and cut between shots fast enough to maintain a breakneck pace within the action. I don't like Reloaded or Revolutions, but even those films understood this. Resurrections doesn't. Not only is the camera cutting between the shots so rapidly that you can't even make out what's even going on, making the action frustratingly disorientating, but the fight choreography is nowhere near as good as it was in the other films. All of the cast have proven in the past that they have the ability to carry an action sequence, so it's baffling that the action sequences in this film look the way they do, and the film's shockingly lackluster animation and effects don't help either, which only stick out more when compared to the original film, which came out in 1999. There are some things that I liked. The performances are all great. Jessica Henwick as Bugs was a major standout, as was Yahya Abdul-Mateen II as a very charismatic and delightfully over-the-top Morpheus, and Jonathan Groff does a really good job as Smith. Neil Patrick Harris as the main antagonist, the analyst, was very charismatic, and whenever he was on screen, he was honestly a delight. I also think that the movie does present some really cool ideas. For example, it's established that some of the machines called sentients rebelled against the other machines and now fight alongside the humans. The scenes that showcased humans and machines working together, such as a scene where a sentient and a human are trying to grow fruit and vegetables to act as a better food source, were genuinely really intriguing. It's just a shame that the movie never devotes any time to explore this idea further, so much like the rest of the film, it goes nowhere. The Matrix Resurrections had the potential to take the franchise in a new and interesting direction, but sadly that potential was squandered by the film's excessive need to reference and essentially rehash the plot of the first film, coming across as a soulless reboot disguised as a pretentious critique on nostalgia. The good ideas that the film presents are barely explored and only serve as painful reminders of how amazing this movie could have been, because the movie we ended up with just went nowhere, and therefore fails to justify its own existence. While I really don't like Reloaded or Revolutions, I would rather sit through those movies over Resurrections, because at least those movies actually try to expand on the first film by taking the story in a direction that was at the very least creative, exploring new ideas and concepts that took the story and characters where they hadn't been before, rather than trying to cling on to the nostalgia of the first film. And because of that, their existence feels justified, and The Matrix Resurrections can't even do that.